How do you survive when the child you nursed through fever now snarls, "Pay rent or get out, Mom"? Stick around, because the choice I made next cost him more than dollars and bought me a freedom he never saw coming. My name is Sara Washington. I'm 73, and yes, my hearing is almost gone, and a fractured hip keeps me bedbound most days. But I promise you, this soul still marches to its own drum. Before we dive in, tap that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? Your support helps stories like mine reach every heart that needs them. I used to measure mornings by the creak of Walter's boots on our farmhouse stairs, the way he hummed Louis Armstrong while frying bacon. When my husband died last spring, stroke, sudden, crushing, sound itself felt murdered. Grief swelled so heavy my bones rebelled. One misstep sent me crashing, shattering the femoral head doctors said was already brittle as sugar glass. Surgery happened, but healing stalled. I lay flat in our marriage bed, watching ceiling fans whirl month after month, learning pain's every dialect. Enter Marcus, my only son, 38, broad-shouldered like his daddy but strapped with city-slick urgency. He said, "Mama, sell the farm and move in with us. We'll take care of you." I believed that promise the way farmers trust seasons, hope stitched to necessity. I signed papers through blurry grief, packed 3 boxes, wedding album, Bible, and Walter's harmonica, and rode south to Marcus's suburban duplex in Fayetteville. At first, it felt like mercy. His wife, Tanya, greeted me with a rehearsed smile, lavender candles burning to mask hospital smells, she said. My room was a converted office. Too narrow for a wheelchair turn, but I thanked them anyway. Tanya taught special ed once. I assumed compassion lived in her marrow. I was wrong. Days blurred into pill schedules and muffled Netflix marathons. My hearing aids quit after one accidental wash. Batteries cost money I didn't have. Without sound, I depended on smells. Tanya's vanilla lotion signaled bedtime. Marcus's grilled chicken meal prep meant Sunday. Soon even those faded. Tanya complained old people odor clung to hallways. They stopped helping me sponge bath. I resorted to baby wipes, scrubbing skin raw, praying deodorant covered embarrassment. They left plates of cold oatmeal and applesauce on my nightstand, easy to swallow, easy to ignore. When I begged for something savory, Tanya said the budget was tight. Budget, funny word. When I owned a secret bank account Walter built from decades of crop cash, 6 figures intended for Marcus once our grandson Caleb turned 18. Walter believed inheritance should reward fatherhood done right. He never imagined fatherhood might curdle. One sticky July afternoon, Tanya burst into my room waving an electricity bill. "We can't keep footing everything," she snapped. "Either contribute or move to a nursing home." Her words reached me as visual punches, lips twisting, eyes scorched. Marcus appeared behind her, arms crossed. "Mom, you've had a year to adjust," he said loudly, over-enunciating like I was stupid, not deaf. "Rent's $1,500 or you find somewhere else." My heart stuttered. Before grief, I'd been a church treasurer, balancing columns by scent of ledger ink. I knew numbers. Their mortgage couldn't be half that. They were asking disability checks I didn't receive. I tried to answer, voice rusty, thin, but they'd already marched out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle pain pills off the dresser. That night, I lay staring at the shadowed ceiling fan of someone else's house, resentment coiling into resolve. Walter's secret funds whispered from the vault of my memory. Choose dignity over guilt. I decided Marcus would not inherit a dime, not after this, but vengeance wasn't my aim. Safety was. I reached for my late husband's flip phone, I keep it charged for sentiment, and typed a text by finger memory. Need advice on elder housing? Call tomorrow. I sent it to Pastor Delaney, Walter's fishing buddy and executor of the trust. Morning light found me rehearsing independence like lines from a forgotten play. When Marcus stomped in demanding an answer, I held up a scribbled note. Writing carries where sound fails. Give me 2 weeks, then I'll go. He looked relieved. Relief sharpened into greed. Fine. Rent due till then, he mouthed slowly. I nodded, pocketing humiliation like spare change soon to be spent, but Marcus underestimated farm wives. That afternoon, Pastor Delaney rolled up in his truck. Bible tucked beneath legal folders. Over lukewarm tea, he explained options. Assisted living with on-site therapy or a private room at Golden Shoals Senior Community. Expensive, yes, but prepayable from the trust's emergency clause. Walter provided for you, Sara, he said gently. That money obeys your need. Tears blurred. Yes, we drafted paperwork canceling Marcus's future disbursement pending a review of filial conduct. Pastor promised to deliver it to the trustee board by week's end. I asked if I could sell the farmhouse remnants to fund a charitable bursary instead. He smiled. Walter would beam. As sunset painted walls orange, I stared at the half-eaten applesauce beside my bed, tasting betrayal in every spoonful. 2 weeks felt too long, yet patience now served strategy. I would leave gracefully, but not invisibly. I would make sure Marcus saw the cost of contempt, not in lectures, but in the silence of a will rewritten. You won't believe the night my secret exit plan collided with Tanya's hidden bank app, forcing my son to face hungry consequences. Roughly 3 hours after Pastor Delaney drove away, I heard Tanya's heels clicking like metronomes outside my door, sharp, impatient, too fast for her usual languid glide. The door cracked open without a knock. She held her phone at arm's length the way one holds a bug they're deciding whether to squash. Even without hearing aids, I could read tension in her jaw. Something in her digital kingdom had gone wrong. Marcus, she barked into the hallway, come here now. He shuffled in. Pajama pants, t-shirt, confusion. Tanya shoved the phone under his nose. Why is the future fund account locked? It says parental trust under review. That's our security blanket. I lay still, eyes half closed, pretending a nap. Years on a farm taught me predators reveal secrets when prey plays possum. Marcus scrolled, face draining. The trustee must have flagged something. Dad's money was supposed to stay untouched till Caleb turns 18. Tanya, of course, already knew that, but greed doesn't abide cliff notes. When we refinanced the SUV, I used that balance as collateral. If it disappears, we're sunk. SUV collateral, Walter's voice rose inside me like gospel. You can't fix folks who mortgage tomorrow for a faster ride today. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. Maybe they just need proof Mom still lives here and isn't in danger. Danger. Interesting choice. Tanya folded arms. Get her to sign whatever. I'm not losing my Escalade because your mother wants sympathy. My eyelids fluttered open as if roused. I mouthed, thirsty. They flinched. Guilt is a sensitive nerve. Marcus fetched water while Tanya hovered. I scribbled on a notepad, kept by the pillow since speech cost me breath. Trustee made surprise visit, routine audit. Tanya's eyes narrowed at my neat cursive. Did you tell him something? I wrote. Just that I'm moving to assisted living, trust covers costs, her nostrils flared, and our inheritance? I shrugged. An actor's practiced, maybe. Marcus returned, handed me the cup. He smelled of stale coffee and panic. Ma, about moving? Can we slow down? Things are tight. I sipped, pretending not to notice the tremor in his hand. Placing cup down, I wrote, "Need physical therapy daily. You can't provide." Tanya hissed, "We provide plenty." I uncapped my magic marker, one swipe of truth, applesauce meal. Marcus blushed crimson, but Tanya's face chilled. "Fine," she snarled. "Move out tomorrow. I'll call a cab and rent for this month, 600 cash." Cash? They discounted the price since breakfast. Inflation of cruelty. I raised eyebrows, gestured to my leg brace, wrote, "Need bank visit. You drive, I withdraw." Marcus brightened. "Money salvage," he nodded. "Tomorrow morning." Tanya spun on her heel, hauling Marcus into the hall for whispered warfare. I drank the rest of the water, heart pounding victory beats. Tomorrow would be our final scene. I didn't sleep. Instead, I packed Bible, wedding album, Walter's harmonica, a lavender sachet stitched by church ladies. At dawn, Tanya banged the door. "Let's roll." She had applied berry lipstick and a smile that didn't reach pupils. Marcus pushed my wheelchair, loading me into their SUV, the one now threatened by escrow. Leather seats smelled like someone else's success. During the drive to First Southern Bank, Tanya lectured Caleb via Bluetooth about chores. The irony of parenting advice while extorting an elderly woman amused me enough to hide a grin. Inside the bank, I asked the teller for a withdrawal of $600 in cash, enough to satisfy the ogres at home, and a cashier's check payable to Golden Shoals Senior Community for my full move-in fee, drawn from Walter's trust account. The teller's eyebrows arched. She glanced at Marcus, who hovered like a nervous crow. Trustee authorization ID already sat on file. Pastor had seen to that. Transaction approved. As money counted, I requested a small private booth to review documents. Marcus agreed, impatient to grab rent. In the booth, I signed residence papers, Pastor delivered via courier, and slipped them into a prepaid envelope. Then I penned a letter. "Dear Marcus, today you receive the last support I will ever owe you. 600's the cost of courtesy. Walter's Trust now funds dignity, not dependence. When Caleb turns 18, he'll learn why. Love, Mom." I sealed it with the cashier's check receipt copy and tucked it into my purse. Back in the lobby, I handed Marcus the cash. Tanya snatched it, smirked. "Taxi fare home is on you, Sara." She wheeled me to the curb, hailed a cab, and shoved a scribbled address into the driver's hand. Golden Shoals, no hug, no goodbye. As SUV fumes faded, cab driver, a young woman humming Billie Holiday, adjusted mirror. She smiled gently. "Golden Shoals, right? Nice place." I exhaled first, real breath in months. Golden Shoals greeted me with lemon-polished floors and a nurse named Ella, who communicated via clear speech and, bless her, large print notes. My room overlooked a koi pond. Therapy gym down the hall glowed with morning sunshine. Ella helped unpack. When she lifted Walter's harmonica, I told her, in slow, breathy voice, it once serenaded spring onions from seed. She laughed, said we'd test its magic on the koi. Afternoon, Pastor Delaney arrived with Caleb, surprise orchestrated through Rachel. The boy hugged me hard, eyes brimming. "Dad said you moved because you're sick," he signed, middle school ASL elective. I signed back, "Better now." Pastor handed me trustee amendments. Marcus's inheritance suspended pending ethical review until Caleb's college age. Caleb's share untouched. The boy didn't yet grasp the legal ballet, but he felt relief. Before bedtime, I texted Marcus using speech-to-text. Arrived safely. Rent paid in full. Trust adjusted. Then I switched off the phone, letting his frantic replies bounce into unanswered silence. Lying in a bed that smelled of lavender and agency, hip cradled by memory foam bliss, I allowed tears of grief, of freedom. Tomorrow, physical therapy would hurt like sin, but healing often does. My final thought before sleep. Applesauce is sweet, but justice tastes better. While I learned to walk with a titanium hip and fresh resolve, my son woke up to a driveway missing one luxury SUV and a bank account, frozen by the very trust he thought would cushion him. What happened next showed me that rock bottom can also be a solid foundation, if the guilty choose to build. Golden Shoals ran on a symphony of schedules: 6:30 vitals, 7 o'clock oatmeal, 8 sharp physical therapy. The second morning I was there, Ella wheeled me to the therapy gym where parallel bars gleamed beneath skylights. Ready for a little rebellion against gravity, she teased, handing me a gait belt. 10 shaky steps later, sweat dripped but triumph buzzed. Each pace whispered, I left before they pushed me. When Ella settled me back in my room, a nurse aide delivered a tablet with closed-caption text messages cued from Marcus. I adjusted the font to billboard size and scrolled, 8:04 a.m. Mom, where are you? Rent's due again in 2 weeks. 17 a.m. Bank says account frozen. Did you sign something? 10:02 a.m. Tanya's Escalade got towed. They said payment default. 10:45 a.m. Please call. Caleb's upset. I set the tablet aside. Some lessons bake best in silence. Mid-morning, Pastor Delaney visited with a folder labeled Family Contingency Clause. He tapped a paragraph Walter snuck into the trust. Should the designated heir demonstrate financial or emotional neglect toward the surviving spouse, said, heir may earn reinstatement by providing 6 consecutive months of documented caretaking or verifiable community service, benefiting vulnerable elders. My eyebrows climbed. Walter believed in prodigal sons, the pastor said. He also believed in proof. What does community service qualify as? I asked. Anything substantive. Volunteer hours here at Golden Shoals, home repair projects for seniors, financial workshops. The board reviews evidence at the 6-month mark. I pictured Marcus loading meal trays, Tanya sanitizing wheelchairs, humility scrubbing bubbles. Could entitlement stretch that far? The clause felt like both sword and olive branch. I asked Pastor to email Marcus a copy. No commentary, just cold legal possibility. Marcus hits bottom. That afternoon, Ella rolled in a TV cart. Local news flashed footage of a repossession tow truck hauling away a pearl-white Escalade while Tanya screamed at a stoic driver. The caption read, Luxury SUV seized in trust dispute. A talking head speculated about elder abuse investigations. Anchors tisk-tisked politely. I sipped chamomile, hips aching less than my heart. Public shame stings, but sometimes disinfectant must burn. My tablet pinged at sunset. New message, Marcus again. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad things got. Is there a way to fix this? I breathed out, letting wind chime memories of the farm steady me. I typed slowly. Walter left a path. 6 months of real service. Begin tomorrow at Golden Shoals. Volunteer desk 7 a.m. Your choice. No guilt, no bargaining. Just coordinates. Day 1 of redemption. Next morning, I watched through my window as Marcus trudged across the courtyard, shirt untucked, hair unstyled. First time I'd seen him without curated bravado since high school. The volunteer coordinator assigned him laundry detail, folding sheets, fetching gowns, learning humility and bleach fumes. At lunch break, he appeared at my door. Cheeks flushed with embarrassment and detergent steam, he signed onto my notepad. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I was a jerk. I wrote back, actions, adjectives, keep folding. He nodded and returned to the carts. Word traveled fast among residents. The new fellow in laundry was my son earning forgiveness. Some clucked tongues, others offered grace only elders can give. By week's end, he'd logged 35 hours, wrists raw but eyes clearer. Tanya, meanwhile, vanished from social media, her curated life replaced by a single cryptic post, learning which people love you for real. Caleb visited Saturday, sneaking contraband peppermints into my palm. He told me schoolmates teased him after the news clip. Dad says we're paying back mistakes, he whispered. I signed. Paying forward kindness, too. He grinned, understanding more than his years. Tanya's turn. Monday, Tanya appeared at the admissions desk wearing thrift store scrubs 2 sizes too big. She avoided my gaze as the coordinator pointed her toward kitchen duty. By lunch, gossip claimed she'd cried over industrial dish steam. By dinner, she carried plates with polite silence. That evening, she knocked on my door, eyes rimmed red. I never thanked you for everything Walter left, and I'm sorry for applesauce, she said, voice brittle. My reply was softer than I expected. Dignity feeds better than grits. She exhaled, tears dripping. I'd like to help with your PT, if Ella agrees. We started small. Tanya adjusting my gait belt, counting reps aloud though I could barely hear. Her voice, once a whip, became a metronome, steady and encouraging. Something thawed. Surprise from Legal Week 3 arrived with another envelope from the trustee board. Marcus and Tanya's hours logged, attitudes noted. But inside was also a cashier's check, $50,000 made out to Golden Shoals in Caleb's handwriting. Pastor explained the boy sold his gaming computer collection online, insisting elders needed comfort more than he needed pixels. My fractured hip ached, but my heart soared, seed of a new lineage sprouting. I penned a letter to Caleb. You've shown more manhood at 16 than some manage in 40. I tucked it beneath his pillow when he visited. That night, Marcus requested to push my wheelchair outside. We circled the koi pond under humming garden lights. Crickets chirred like forgiving applause. Mom, he began, voice trembling, I thought taking you in was noble. I treated it like charity, not responsibility. He swallowed. I want to earn back Dad's trust money, but more, I want to earn back yours. I stopped the chair, grabbed his hand. Inheritance isn't payment, I said, forcing each word despite tired lungs. It's stewardship. Prove you can steward people. Tears shone in his eyes. He nodded. The path ahead. Volunteer hours ticked on, Tanya mastering soft food seasonings, Marcus learning how linens can cradle dignity. Residents laughed at his sloppy hospital corner attempts, then taught him tricks nurses learn in war. I healed. 40 steps unassisted, then 50. The trust board watched, weighing intentions. Whether 6 months would grant them redemption, I couldn't know, but I knew this. Walter's clause hadn't only punished neglect, it offered blueprint for rebuilding, and sometimes blueprints need pain-stained revisions before foundation holds. As I drifted to sleep, hip wrapped in warm compress, I felt something surprising. Hope, freshly laundered and neatly folded. FOMO, in Chapter 2. Part 2. You'll discover Tanya's secret side hustle to replace the SUV, watch Marcus face a past IRS debt exposed by Walter's meticulous ledgers, and see whether the trustee board stamps reinstated or revoked on my son's inheritance. Hinges squeak. Doors of destiny swing soon. By the 4th month at Golden Shoals, life had settled into a rhythm that, to anyone watching from the outside, might have looked almost ordinary. Mornings began with the hum of laundry machines where Marcus now worked without complaint, folding sheets with edges so crisp the nurses teased him about joining the military. Tanya had made the kitchen her domain, ladling soup into bowls, plating roast chicken for residents who called her darlin' in that southern way, and learning how to stretch a budget without cutting kindness. Caleb visited every Saturday, laying his algebra homework across my lap so I could check his answers, just like I did when he was a boy, hunched over our farmhouse table. But beneath that new routine ran a taut undercurrent, a sense that something important was unresolved. I felt it in the way Marcus avoided my eyes when talk of money surfaced, and in Tanya's habit of checking her phone in the hallway before she came into my room. The truth finally cracked through one rainy Thursday when Pastor Delaney appeared at my door, carrying Walter's old lockbox and a slim manila envelope from the trust's accountants. He set them on my tray table, his expression a blend of sympathy and business. "Sara," he said, "we've been combing through Walter's ledgers. You know how meticulous he was. There's something your son will have to face before the board can even consider full reinstatement." He slid the envelope toward me. Inside were crisp photocopies of IRS notices addressed to Marcus, unpaid tax bills from 2 years before, each stamped in red, "Final warning." Pastor explained that Walter had found out about the debt before he died, but chose to say nothing, hoping Marcus would take responsibility on his own. "If he doesn't resolve this," Pastor continued, "the board will see it as a failure of stewardship, regardless of his volunteer hours here. The clause in Walter's trust is about responsibility, not just service." I took a slow breath, the weight of the papers pressing into my palms. "Let me tell him," I said. "This is something a mother should say herself." That evening, Tanya came in first, wheeling my supper tray. She looked tired, but there was a spark of satisfaction in her eyes. When I asked her how the work was going, she hesitated, then pulled a small jar from her apron pocket. "I've been doing something extra," she said. The label read, "Sara's Sunday Blend." She explained that she'd started mixing custom spice blends from the recipes she'd perfected in the facility kitchen and selling them to other nursing homes and even a few local restaurants. "I want to replace the SUV on my own," she said, voice firm. "I don't want anyone saying it came from your money or your pity." I turned the jar in my hands, imagining her measuring paprika and thyme with the same precision she once used to measure criticism. There was a new steadiness in her tone, and for the first time I thought perhaps she wasn't just going through the motions. When Marcus came in later, I didn't waste time. I handed him the IRS copies without preamble. His shoulders sagged, and he sat heavily in the chair beside my bed. "I was hoping that mess would just disappear," he admitted, "but I guess Dad knew everything, didn't he?" I nodded, keeping my gaze steady. "If you want the board to see you as someone worthy of Walter's trust, you have to make this right. No excuses, no delays." He rubbed his hands over his face, the way he used to do after a hard football loss in high school, then finally nodded. "I'll fix it." The very next morning, I watched from my window as he left the grounds early, headed to meet with the tax advisor the trust recommended. It was the first time I'd seen him take initiative without being prodded. Over the next weeks, between his regular laundry shifts, he began picking up extra handyman work around Golden Shoals, fixing leaky faucets, repainting baseboards, tightening wobbly railings. He brought his own toolbox from home and, to my surprise, started asking residents what repairs they needed. Tanya's spice orders began picking up too. One afternoon, she brought me a new blend to try, cinnamon and nutmeg, balanced so well it reminded me of the pies Walter used to bake. By the time the 6th month approached, the change in them both was visible. Marcus walked straighter, his eyes meeting mine without flinching. Tanya smiled more easily, her voice warmer when she asked if I needed anything. Caleb still came every weekend, and one Saturday he shyly handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to Golden Shoals. He explained, half proud, half embarrassed, that he'd sold his gaming computer collection and some collectibles online. "I figured the people here need more than I do," he said. My throat tightened. I wrote him a note that said, "You've shown more manhood at 16 than many manage in a lifetime." He tucked it into his backpack like treasure. The day of the trustee review, Marcus wore a clean dress shirt, Tanya a simple navy dress. They sat before the board and presented their evidence. Marcus's payment plan with the IRS, letters from residents praising his kindness and reliability, Tanya's small business ledger showing steady, honest income. I watched from the side of the room as questions were asked and answered without defensiveness. Pastor passed the board members a final document, confirmation from the IRS that Marcus had made his first 3 payments on time. There was a long pause after the last question, the kind that makes you feel the air might collapse under its own weight. Then, the chairperson took up the stamp and pressed it onto the file. Reinstated. A murmur ran around the table, but I hardly heard it over the quiet exhale Marcus let out. He turned toward me, eyes bright but steady. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm not the man who told you to pay rent or get out. I don't ever want to be him again." For the first time since Walter's funeral, I believed him. Not because of the stamp on a piece of paper, but because I'd watched the work it took to earn it. The hours in the laundry, the sweat over repairs, the humility in asking for guidance, the pride Tanya took in earning back something of her own. The trust money might flow to him again someday, but more importantly, so might my trust. And in the quiet ride back to my room with the manila folder resting on my lap, I felt the smallest but surest seed of hope take root. The day after the reinstatement, the air in my room at Golden Shoals felt different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. Marcus came in at 7 a.m. Sharp. Not in his volunteer polo, but in clean jeans and a flannel shirt, carrying a tray from the kitchen. The scent of bacon and buttered toast drifted through the doorway. "Figured we could start fresh," he said, setting the tray on my lap. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "A fresh start isn't a single morning, Marcus. It's every morning after." He nodded, the corners of his mouth tightening, but there was no defensiveness in his eyes, just a quiet acceptance. By mid-morning, Tanya stopped by, her hair pulled into a messy bun, spice jars rattling in the crate she carried. "First big order to a restaurant in town," she said, setting the crate on my side table, "and they want a standing order every month." I congratulated her, and she grinned. "Part of the deal is they'll sponsor a monthly lunch here for the residents." My recipes. For a moment, I could picture Walter leaning against the kitchen doorway back at the farmhouse, smiling that slow, approving smile he saved for rare occasions. Around noon, Pastor Delaney arrived with Caleb in tow. The boy was practically bouncing, waving an envelope over his head. "Got my acceptance letter," he said breathlessly. "State University, early decision, and a scholarship." Pride swelled in my chest, so sharp it hurt. When he handed me the letter, I traced his name at the top, imagining Walter's hand on his shoulder. "You've earned this, Caleb," I told him. "Not just for your grades, though those are good, but for your heart." It would have been a perfect day if not for the phone call that came just after supper. Ella, the evening nurse, handed me the cordless phone with a frown. "Said it's urgent," she mouthed. On the other end was a voice I hadn't heard in months, my niece Lorraine. She sounded nervous. "Aunt Sarah, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Marcus and Tanya's mortgage is in trouble again. I overheard them at the bank. They didn't know I was there." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temple. After everything, I murmured. Lorraine hesitated. They're trying, but the numbers don't look good, and I think they're too proud to tell you. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing Walter's words from the trust clause about stewardship and responsibility. Marcus had worked hard these past months, yes, but old habits are stubborn. I wasn't ready to let the inheritance become a lifeline for another cycle of debt. Lying in the dark, I decided that if my son's fresh start was going to stick, he'd have to face this storm without expecting me to hold the umbrella over his head. The next morning, I asked Marcus to take me for a walk around the koi pond. The air was brisk, the kind that stings your cheeks but wakes you up. Lorraine called me, I said without preamble. His steps faltered. She told me about the mortgage. He started to explain, words tumbling fast about rising insurance rates, Tanya's inventory costs, the truck needing repairs. I held up my hand. Stop. You don't have to explain it to me. You have to explain it to yourself. You've done good work these months, Marcus, but if you slip back into the same hole, no rope I give you will keep you out. You need a plan, not a bailout. He didn't argue. We walked in silence, the koi flashing gold and white beneath the water. After a long while, he said, maybe it's time we sold the house and moved somewhere smaller, something we can actually afford. That surprised me. Admitting the need for change had never been his strong suit. If you do that, I said, and you keep your commitments here and to your family, then you'll prove to me and to the board that the last 6 months weren't just an act. He nodded slowly. I want to prove it, Mom. I don't want to lose what we've built back. As we rounded the pond, Tanya appeared waving a sheet of paper. Marcus! The restaurant doubled their order for next month, she called. Her cheeks flushed with excitement. She slowed when she saw us. Everything okay? Marcus and I exchanged a glance, and for the first time in a long while I saw no shame in his eyes, only determination. Yeah, he said, everything's going to be okay. We've got work to do. And for the first time since Walter passed, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, it would be. 3 weeks after our conversation by the koi pond, I found myself watching a small miracle unfold from the common room window at Golden Shoals. Marcus and Tanya had followed through on the impossible-sounding promise to put their oversized duplex on the market, and that morning, a sold sign swung briskly in the winter wind. A modest 3-bedroom house on the other side of town, half the square footage, twice the character, was already under contract for them, its mortgage comfortably within a single paycheck. They wouldn't move in until spring, but the difference in their step was immediate. Marcus walked the hallways with a carpenter's tape measure dangling from his belt, volunteering to install grab bars in residents' bathrooms. Tanya tested new herb blends on anyone willing to sample her soups, laughing easier, shoulders no longer hunched by secret panic. Caleb, meanwhile, had thrown himself into earning spending money for university. Every Saturday, he stocked shelves at the local hardware store and still arrived in the afternoon to study in the sunny alcove near my room. One rainy Saturday, he showed me a spreadsheet he'd built, tuition costs, scholarship disbursements, even mileage for the used car he hoped to buy. Dad helps me double-check formulas, he said, pride tucked neatly behind his grin. Marcus, who had never balanced a checkbook in my presence, now spent evenings teaching his son about compound interest and the danger of credit cards. I listened from the doorway once and felt Walter's absence ache a little less. On the last Friday of the month, The Carter Blackwood Foundation held its first fundraising gala in the Golden Shoals courtyard. Canvas tents, thrifted string lights, and Tanya's citrus ginger meatballs stealing the show. Marcus served hors d'oeuvres in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled, while Caleb handed out programs that detailed new elder outreach projects. I had insisted Pastor Delaney read a short statement from me rather than wheel me to the podium. Stronger voices should carry the night. When he finished, applause rose warm and earnest, but the real triumph came an hour later when a regional bank executive approached Marcus with an offer: lead weekly financial literacy workshops for older adults, paid through a community development grant. Marcus accepted on the spot, eyes bright as sunrise. The only sour note arrived the next morning in a stiff envelope forwarded from my old farmhouse address. Inside lay a terse letter from my estranged sister-in-law, Judith. I hear you've turned Walter's savings into a circus. You always were dramatic, Sara. Just remember the family name when next you seek headlines. I nearly tossed the letter, but instead tucked it into my journal, evidence perhaps of how far we'd come. Headlines weren't my goal. Legacies were. Mid-February brought an unexpected test of that legacy. A nor'easter dipped south, flinging ice across Georgia roads and knocking out power at Golden Shoals just after midnight. Emergency generators hummed alive, but the facility's old boiler sputtered and died. Within an hour, hallways cooled to dangerous levels and staff scrambled to bundle residents in layers. Marcus and Tanya arrived before dawn, having driven the final mile on sleet-coated asphalt after abandoning their car at a police barricade. Marcus coordinated a bucket brigade of space heaters brought by volunteers. Tanya ladled steaming turmeric broth from a giant stock pot she'd balanced on a portable propane burner. Around 7 o'clock, the fire department declared the building safe but cold for at least another 12 hours. Space heaters helped, but the vulnerable needed warmth and calm. Marcus made a decision that would have shocked the man he'd been 6 months earlier. He called his real estate agent and asked for access to the empty bungalow they were about to purchase. By 8, he and Tanya had shuttled half the memory care residents, blankets, oxygen tanks, favorite teddy bears, into the vacant living room, which still smelled of fresh paint. Neighbors delivered extra quilts. Caleb organized board games in the garage. The sight of those frail elders gathered around Tanya's makeshift soup station, steam curling toward the ceiling while Caleb taught them dominoes, felt like witnessing the trust clause's promise come alive. When the boiler was finally replaced 2 days later, the trustees conducted a surprise audit of Marcus's 6 consecutive months of caretaking. They found not only the required volunteer logs, but also letters from the fire captain praising his quick thinking, receipts showing he and Tanya had covered propane costs themselves, and testimonials from residents who, in scrawled handwriting, called him the tall angel with warm blankets. The board's vote to release the first reinstatement installment was unanimous, but Marcus stunned them by requesting that half the distribution be directed straight into a new emergency relief fund for Golden Shoals. "We got by this time on luck and borrowed space," he said. "Next storm, we should have dedicated resources ready." Tanya, standing beside him, added that her spice blend profits would refresh the fund annually. Trustees sat speechless a moment before applause broke out. That evening, back in my room, Marcus knocked and entered without the old hesitation. He sat on the edge of my armchair, holding the trust release documents. "It's strange," he said, turning the pages, "knowing Dad's money is finally accessible and feeling no urge to spend it on myself." He looked up. "Mom, I was sure 6 months ago that you'd written me out of your life. I deserved it. Thank you for leaving a door worth walking back through. I took his hand, felt the calluses that folding laundry and fixing boilers had built. Doors are only useful if someone learns how to knock, I replied. Later, after lights out, I slipped Walter's harmonica from my bedside drawer. The hip ache was mild tonight, the corridor hushed. Except for distant beeps of monitors, I pressed the metal to my lips and blew a soft, wavering chord. The note wasn't pretty. Years of disuse and my own shaky breath saw to that. But it carried down the hallway. A small, stubborn anthem, and as it faded, I thought of every crisis that had become a step forward, every bitter lesson that had fertilized growth. Marcus and Tanya still had miles to walk. Caleb had years yet to prove the man he'd chosen to be, and I had therapy sessions ahead that would either strengthen my hip or test my resolve. But the runway Walter built, paved by trust, guarded by love tough enough to demand change, was lit end to end now, ready for whatever takeoff the future required. Spring tiptoed onto the grounds of golden shoals in pale green buds and insistent birdsong, and with it came the first call from the Atlanta Herald. A reporter named Lila Chen wanted an in-depth piece on the family that turned elder neglect into a statewide safety net. I was wary of headlines, but Pastor Delaney argued that Sunlight kept stories honest. We agreed to an interview on the condition that no photo would be printed without every resident's consent. Lila arrived with a voice recorder, soft-soled shoes, and questions sharp enough to slice excuses. Mrs. Washington, when did you know withholding the inheritance was the only leverage that might save your son from himself? I told her it wasn't leverage but love with teeth, love that refused to smile while it bled. She nodded, eyes glinting, and kept her recorder running while Tanya demonstrated the new industrial spice grinder funded by her orders, flakes of marigold-colored turmeric dusting the air like dawn. The article ran under the headline Runway of Redemption and landed harder than I expected. Donations to the Emergency Relief Fund tripled in a week. More astonishing was the flood of letters from parents across Georgia. My daughter ignores me. How did you find the courage to demand better? A retired nurse wrote that she'd hidden money from her own son after he pressured her to refinance her house. She now wanted to start her own version of our program in Savannah and asked for our blueprint. As Tanya sorted the mail, Marcus skimmed envelopes, cheeks coloring each time a line echoed his former cruelty. Every letter is a mirror, he murmured, and kept reading. 2 weeks later, Judith, the sister-in-law whose letter had sneered at my circus, left a voicemail, her tone unexpectedly humble. "Sarah, I've been thinking, could we meet?" Part of me bristled, but Walter's harmonica glinted on the dresser, a reminder that grudges rust souls. I suggested Saturday in the Golden Shoals courtyard. She arrived clutching a faded photo album. We sat on a bench while spring sunlight sifted through dogwoods. Judith opened to a 1971 Polaroid. She and Walter, teenagers, posing with a tractor tire bigger than both of them. Her voice cracked. "Your article made me miss who my brother used to be. I'm sorry I judged how you honored him." She pulled out a folded check, $5,000, made to the foundation. "It isn't much," she said, "but maybe it mends a fraction." I accepted, feeling a brick of resentment loosen from my chest. The same afternoon, Marcus asked if I'd like to visit their soon-to-be new home. Ella okayed a field trip as long as I used the travel wheelchair. Caleb drove, Tanya navigated. Marcus lifted me up the short ramp they'd already installed on the porch. The house smelled of unvarnished pine and possibility. One bedroom would become a guest suite, Marcus said, in case you want overnight visits, or if another elder ever needs a safe weekend. He'd refinished the floors himself. Tanya's spice jars lined the kitchen pass-through like stained glass windows. As we toured, I noticed a corkboard in the study pinned with color-coded index cards titled Debt-Free Countdown and Emergency Fund Milestones. Beneath, Caleb had added his own column, Scholarship Renewal Goals. Seeing our family's failings turned into a lesson plan for future responsibility felt like Walter's hand steady on my shoulder. Back at Golden Shoals, April rolled toward its final week, and Pastor announced that the foundation had met criteria to register as a statewide nonprofit. We would need a board seat filled by a beneficiary of our services, not a relative. Mrs. Ortega nominated herself, cheeky glint in her eye, and won unanimously. First order of business, she declared at the inaugural meeting, banging a ladle like a gavel. Secure funding for a mobile bath and laundry van so no elder must sponge bathe in shame again. The room erupted in applause. Marcus volunteered to draft the grant proposal, Tanya offered proceeds from her next spice batch, and Caleb pledged half his graduation gift money. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wheeled to the balcony outside the therapy gym, hip aching in the cool air, and watched stars tremble above pine silhouettes. Marcus found me there past midnight, blanket over his arm. He draped it across my shoulders and crouched so we were eye level. "Mom," he whispered, "I keep thinking about what Dad would say if he could see all this." I smiled at the sky. He'd say the harvest was worth the plowing. Marcus chuckled, tears shining. I finally understand what stewardship means. He reached into his pocket and produced the trustee's next distribution check, endorsed but unstamped. "I want the board to hold it 6 more months," he said. "Let them see if I keep walking the walk." I laid my hand over his. "That's between you and your conscience now. Mine can rest." A warm breeze rustled the pines, carrying a faint, familiar note. Only then did I realize Marcus had brought Walter's harmonica, tucked in the blanket's folds. He raised it to his lips, managed a shaky G major chord. It wobbled off key, but I heard footsteps of hope in the tremor. As the note faded, he asked softly, "Will you teach me the rest?" I thought of the runway plank above the center's entrance and the koi pond reflecting every turning season. "Yes," I said, "let's learn together." Below, the facility's new backup generator hummed, funded by Judith's check and 50 small donors inspired by Lila's article. Inside, Tanya boxed spice jars for shipment, Caleb studied for finals, and Mrs. Ortega crafted the first budget for her mobile bath van. Understanding, like spring, had seeded itself in every crack our pain once opened, and now it grew wild, resilient. The night felt endless and tender, the kind that promises morning will arrive brighter because someone stayed awake keeping watch. The Mobile Dignity van rolled into the parking lot on a cloudless June morning. 30 feet of gleaming white paneling wrapped in marigold and sage graphics that read, "Clean, warm, respected." Mrs. Ortega stood at the curb with a clipboard, calling roll like the teacher she'd once been, while Marcus knelt beside the rear ramp, tweaking hydraulics so they'd lower smooth enough for the most fragile hips. Tanya carried in boxes of donated towels scented faintly with her new lavender anise blend, and Caleb hoisted toolkits, already asking questions about water heater maintenance for his engineering elective next fall. I watched from my wheelchair at the edge of the crowd. Ella insisted I conserve steps until physical therapy, but my heart felt as tall as any standing figure. Pastor Delaney opened the ceremony with a prayer that mentioned every hand that had scrubbed, cooked, folded, donated, forgiven. Lila Chen from the Atlanta Herald captured photos but promised to publish only those for which each elder had signed consent. Trust, once broken, made meticulous habits. When the ribbon was cut, Judith wielding the scissors like a seasoned gardener, you could almost hear Walter's harmonica lilt on the summer breeze. Residents inched forward to tour the van. 2 private shower stalls with teak benches, a washer-dryer stack powered by roof solar panels, shelves of Tanya's soaps labeled in large print. No more baby wipes unless you want them, she joked, and the laughter felt like sunrise. While the crowd dispersed for lemonade, Marcus joined me under the magnolia, wiping sweat from his brow. Generator test passed, he reported. Mrs. Ortega wants to pilot the first route tomorrow. 3 shut-ins out in Cedar Hollow. I nodded, pride and caution interwoven. Remember backup supplies. Blowouts happen. He grinned. We packed duplicates of everything. Then, as if remembering a lingering worry, he produced a sealed envelope. Board review was yesterday. They cleared the last distribution. He handed me the envelope but didn't open it. I told them to route it to the center's endowment, unless you object. Tears blurred the embossed seal. Your father would approve, I whispered, pressing the envelope back into his hand. That afternoon I insisted on walking, 2 canes instead of a wheelchair, to the koi pond. Marcus and Caleb flanked me, Tanya hovering with a folding chair just in case. The koi glimmered beneath lily pads, and I thought of the day I'd first arrived. Broken-hipped and nearly broken-hearted, I lowered myself onto the bench. There's one more clause in Walter's trust we haven't discussed, I told them. Caleb's eyes widened. Marcus stiffened. He set aside a small parcel of farmland. 5 acres no one's farmed since the drought. It reverts to Caleb on his 21st birthday, but only if he cultivates it or turns it into community use. Caleb's mouth fell open. I don't know how to farm. Marcus laughed gently. Neither did I at 16. He looked at me for permission. I nodded. How about we learn together? He asked his son. Caleb's grin could have lit the whole courtyard. Evening settled with the buzz of cicadas. Tanya and Marcus wheeled me back to my room where a surprise awaited. A polished harmonica resting on my pillow engraved Sara and Walter, Runway in Harmony. Tanya spoke first. The luthier says the reeds are tuned for softer breath. Marcus added, Thought you might teach us the farm lullaby Dad used to play. Emotion trembled in my throat, but I lifted the instrument, pressed it to my lips, and drew a note, clearer than any I'd coaxed in years. Tanya's eyes sparkled. Marcus tapped his foot, instinct finding the beat. Caleb burst through the doorway, phone raised. We're live streaming the first lesson, he announced, and residents gathered in the hall. Smiling at the music drifting past medical charts and nameplates, the tune wobbled, found its pitch, then rose, fragile yet undeniable. Later, after everyone dispersed, Marcus lingered. Mom, he said softly, I used to think wealth was what you kept. Turns out it's what you're trusted to pass along. I reached for his calloused hand. Stewardship, I echoed, the word no longer heavy. Walter planted that seed. We merely tended it. I fell asleep that night to distant laughter from the common room and the hum of the new generator outside, comforted by the knowledge that if another storm hit, no elder at Golden Shoals or beyond would have to shiver alone. In dreams, I saw the runway sign glowing under starlight, the mobile dignity van splashing through country roads, spreading warmth, and somewhere at the edge of dream and memory, Walter's voice whispered, Harvest well, my love, the field is wide. When dawn nudged the horizon pink, I woke ready for tomorrow's miles. Physical therapy at 7, harmonica practice at 9, board planning for the Savannah branch at noon. The runway was lit, the engines warm, and the sky, after so many storms, was finally clear. July heat shimmered off the highway like a mirage when we eased the mobile Dignity van onto I-95, bound for Savannah. Mrs. Ortega rode shotgun with her clipboard, reading directions in the no-nonsense tone that once commanded third-grade classrooms. Marcus drove, window cracked, letting humid breeze ruffle the map Caleb had taped to the dash. Tanya occupied the middle aisle, strapping spice crates against cupboard rails so turmeric jars wouldn't rattle loose. I sat in the wheelchair locked behind her, cane across my lap, humming soft harmonica scales to steady my nerves. This was my first long road trip since the fall that fractured my hip. Ella had cleared me, but anxiety likes to ride free. The Savannah branch, really just a converted carriage house behind St. Jerome's Parish, had been spruced up by volunteers all summer. Fresh paint, ramps, an industrial washer. Oscar the janitor swore could launder guilt out of a bedsheet, yet none of us had actually seen the place in person, and launch day was tomorrow. Pastor joked we were betting our marigolds on faith, which made Tanya laugh and Marcus groan. 2 hours in, a summer thunderhead muscled over the horizon. Rain slammed the windshield so hard wipers squealed. Marcus slowed, but the van began to shimmy. We pulled onto the shoulder and found the culprit, a rear tire hissing like a cornered cat. Caleb leapt out with the jack, determined to prove his hardware store chops, but the spare looked as bald as the blown tire. Panic flickered, yet Mrs. Ortega simply dialed the parish number. 10 minutes later, a dusty pickup appeared, driven by Father Mike himself, collar askew, lug wrench in hand. He swapped tires with farmhand gusto, then insisted on escorting us the final 30 miles, hazard lights blinking like guardian fireflies. As we rolled again, Tanya passed around lemon verbena water and grinned. First mishap, first miracle. Savannah greeted us with moss-draped oaks and air thick as sweet tea. The carriage house stood at the end of a brick alley, clapboards freshly painted sunrise yellow. Volunteers cheered when the van backed in. Teenagers unloaded towel bundles while retirees strung paper lanterns under the eaves. Inside, cross breezes carried a salt tang off the river. My lungs expanded in delight. Marcus tested the new shower fixtures. Hot water gushed like applause. Tanya unpacked spices into the tiny kitchen, and Father Mike rang a brass bell to call everyone for supper. Seafood chowder laced with her bay pepper blend, crusty bread delivered by the bakery across the square. After the meal, Caleb guided me onto the back veranda overlooking the parish gardens. Moonlight revealed neat rows of tomato seedlings, a Boy Scout project the kids abandoned when summer jobs lured them away. Caleb crouched, brushing soil. We could transplant some to our farm plot, he mused. Marcus, overhearing, knelt beside him and described compost ratios while I listened, the ache in my hip softened by generational harmony. Later, in the carriage house loft converted to dorms, I rested on a cot while Mrs. Ortega finalized tomorrow's itinerary. 3 homebound elders on the east side, 2 in a trailer park past the marsh, lunch service at the parish hall. Ambitious, I murmured. She winked. Ex-teachers still believe in extra credit. Dawn arrived pink and urgent. We divided into teams. Marcus drove the first circuit, Caleb navigating. Tanya and I remained at St. Jerome's to greet walk-ins needing laundry. The first was Ms. Luella, 8'1", stooped yet regal in a floral dress heavy with salt stains. While her clothes tumbled, Tanya soaked Luella's swollen feet in lavender mint water and trimmed her nails. Luella sighed, "Child, you got preacher's hands," and Tanya's eyes shone. Mid-morning, a courier arrived bearing an IRS envelope addressed to Marcus. My pulse spiked. Old dread, until I read the letter. Account settled in full. Thank you for your diligence. Tears blurred the text. Tanya hugged me hard, spice-scented hair tickling my cheek. Marcus phoned moments later, voice bright. Mom, last client just hugged me for installing grab bars. And guess what? Debt's dead. I told him I already knew. We shared silence filled with gratitude. Lunch saw a line stretching past the oak gate. Parish kids ladled shrimp grits tweaked with Tanya's Savannah sunrise seasoning. Local reporters snapped photos. Father Mike directed them to interview Miss Luella, who declared into the microphone, "These folks remind me I'm still worthy of warm water and good pepper." Headlines would write themselves. By dusk, the van's water tanks emptied and towel bins full. We regrouped under lanterns. Caleb presented Father Mike with a framed blueprint, expansion sketches for a permanent hygiene suite funded by the Foundation's endowment, Marcus's redistributed check already wired. The priest's eyes misted. "Y'all built a runway," he said, echoing words that felt carved into our bones. That night, back on the veranda, cicadas droned lullabies while Marcus cleaned Walter's harmonica with a cloth. He attempted the farm lullaby again, the note wavered, then found pitch, richer than the courtyard crickets. I added a counter melody, soft, breathy, and Tanya tapped rhythm on the rail. Caleb joined with a hum. Music floated into moss-laden branches mixing with river breeze. Before bed, I journaled beneath a reading lamp. Walter. Harvest looks different than we imagined. Spices instead of soybeans, shower stalls instead of silos. But the field is thriving. I slid Judith's earlier check stub between pages, proof that hearts can pivot. Tomorrow we drive home to Golden Shoals, van lighter by soap and towels, yet heavier with stories. And next month, the farm plot would be tilled. Marcus promised to borrow a neighbor's tractor, Caleb to document soil pH for school credit. My hip would protest, but I'd stand at the edge of the field with canes planted firm, watching seeds sink into earth that remembered Walter's footsteps and welcomed new ones. As I closed my journal, lanterns flickered out, leaving only starlight across the veranda boards. Somewhere in the carriage house, Mrs. Ortega snored a steady teacher's rhythm, ready to tally tomorrow's progress. I whispered to the night, "Runway clear, and let sleep carry me toward another dawn of wheels rolling, water running, and dignity restored. Mile by mile, elder by elder, note by note on a harmonica, tuned for softer breath but louder hope." We rumbled back into Golden Shoals just as July sighed itself into August, the mobile Dignity van rolling under the portico like a homing bird, with empty towel bins and hearts full to spilling. The trip to Savannah had proved the model could travel. Now the trustees wanted numbers, schedules, a statewide calendar. Marcus barely parked before unlocking the center's tool shed, already measuring lumber for a second ramp extension. Tanya disappeared straight to the kitchen to restock spices, humming Moon River because Savannah's moss had apparently wrapped itself around her vocal cords. I let Ella steer my wheelchair to the koi pond, the air thick with late summer jasmine, and watched the bright fish flick through water exactly the color of good possibilities. 2 mornings later, Marcus kept his promise to the land. At dawn, he and Caleb hauled the borrowed tractor to the old 5-acre plot Walter had deeded to our grandson. The field looked forlorn, tangled Johnson grass, clay baked into red armor. But Caleb walked its perimeter with a notebook, jotting pH readings like a young agronomist. I arrived an hour later in the center's minibus. Canes braced against the seat and insisted on standing while Marcus made the first furrow. The tractor's engine coughed, then grumbled forward. Soil split in a dark stripe that smelled of rain no forecast had mentioned. Caleb slid his phone into his pocket, leaned close. "It's weird, Grandma. Dirt sort of talks." I squeezed his arm. Your grandfather said soil is an elder with secrets. Listen well. By noon, volunteers from church, the hardware store, even a few Golden Shoals residents had shown up with gloves and iced tea. Mrs. Ortega laid out color-coded steaks, tomatoes here, pole beans there, a long ribbon of marigolds down the center to keep pests guessing. Tanya set up a folding table loaded with deviled eggs dusted in her new paprika mustard blend. The field, only hours earlier a picture of neglect, began to resemble a patchwork quilt stitched from sweat and stubborn hope. The following week brought the first of Marcus's financial literacy workshops, funded by the bank that had read Lila's article. The conference room filled with gray heads and notebooks, and Marcus, suddenly confident in a thrift store blazer, clicked through slides on compound interest. He confessed he'd learned the hard way about IRS letters and ballooning mortgages, and 20 pens scribbled faster because honesty is compelling data. When the session ended, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Tripp asked if Marcus could help negotiate a predatory reverse mortgage offer. Marcus smiled, the kind that stretches past shame into usefulness, and scheduled a private appointment right then. Caleb's university orientation landed mid-August, a sweltering day that smelled of asphalt and new anxieties. Marcus drove him, Tanya packed spice jar care packages for Caleb's dorm mate lottery, and I, after secret lobbying, convinced Ella to let me ride along. The admissions office had installed wider doors since my last campus visit decades earlier, and the tour guide spoke clearly into my mic'd hearing aid. At the scholarship reception, the dean announced Caleb's additional grant for community impact, thanks to documentation of the mobile dignity van and the farm plot. I watched my grandson shake hands with board members, tie slightly crooked, and thought, the harvest truly does outgrow the planter. August melted into September, and the farm surprised everyone by sprouting rows of green that defied Georgia heat. Pole beans coiled like eager gossip up recycled fencing. Tomato vines bulged with hope red fruit. Marcus scheduled workdays between laundry shifts, and Tanya experimented. Roasted tomato ginger jam, green bean masala with homegrown cilantro, labeling jars with Caleb's hand-drawn logos. The center sold them at a weekend farmer's market. Proceeds fed the emergency relief fund. Even Judith showed up, sun hat askew, proudly hauling marigold bouquets to the booth. The real test came just after Labor Day, when a regional TV station arrived unannounced. The reporter, a brisk woman in a pastel blazer, wanted a live interview about elder abuse prevention grants. I watched Marcus's shoulders tense, remembering cameras from his shame days, but he steadied himself, nodding to Tanya. They spoke not of their redemption arc, but of systems. Mobile hygiene reducing infections, financial workshops slashing scams, farms nurturing intergenerational respect. The reporter seemed stunned, as if expecting a tragic sob story and receiving instead a business plan written in empathy and spreadsheets. That night, a thunderstorm bruised the sky, hammering rain on the center's new metal roof. Power flickered, then held, thanks to the generator fund Marcus had insisted on fortifying. I lay awake, hip aching in the pressure change, and listened to the steady hum of resilience. At 2 a.m., a soft knock broke the rhythm. Marcus slipped inside carrying Walter's harmonica. Couldn't sleep, he whispered. Thought maybe you'd teach me that lullaby proper. I scooted to make room on the edge of the mattress, positioned his fingers, and together we coaxed the tune, halting at first, then smooth as creek water over stones. The storm softened to a hush, as if night itself leaned closer to listen. Days later, a letter arrived from the trust board. After their audit of workshop attendance, farm budgeting, and the Savannah branch's quarterly report, The foundation qualified for a statewide matching grant, dollar for dollar up to $1 million. I felt the paper tremble as I passed it to Marcus. He closed his eyes, whispered, "Dad, look what your seed did." We celebrated with sweet tea popsicles on the koi pond bench, toasting Walter's unseen approval. October brought Caleb home for fall break. The farm gleamed under lower sun, marigold rows blazing like captured daylight. We harvested together, loading baskets so heavy, Marcus joked about adding weightlifting credits to Caleb's transcript. Back at the center kitchen, residents lined up to blanch tomatoes, snap beans, simmer sauce. Tanya announced the first annual Runway Harvest Dinner, open to every elder in the county. Flyers promised live music, which prompted Marcus to practice the harmonica daily until even Mr. Tripp begged for mercy. The dinner arrived cold and crystal clear. Under strings of Edison bulbs, tables groaned with food, grown from neglected soil and seasoned by hands once hardened by resentment. Marcus, tie-swapped for suspenders, opened the evening with a shaky but triumphant performance of Walter's Farm Lullaby, and when the last note hung in the cooled air like frost that hadn't yet decided to land, the crowd rose in applause that warmed every chilled bone. I closed the night seated beside the runway sign, watching elders dance with volunteers, the mobile Dignity van parked like a white guardian at the edge of the field. Caleb asked if he could plant winter greens before heading back to campus, and Marcus was already mapping irrigation lines on a napkin. Tanya stacked empty plates, cheeks red, eyes bright. In that moment, I felt the rare blessing of completion and momentum at once, proof that endings can seed beginnings if you dare to prune. When the last lantern flickered out and the night settled into the hush of a farm ready for dreams, I whispered toward the stars, "Runway forever open," and I swear a harmonica note drifted back on the breeze, low and sure, promising there would always be another dawn for wheels to roll, water to run, seeds to break open, and dignity, hard won, to keep on blooming.